A man who had only worked overtime witnessed a murder, leaving Nick terrified and hiding in a corner. What could he do? While the killer was disposing of the body, he rushed to the bathroom, ready to hide. But upon opening the door, he saw the body of the company's security guard. Nick went to investigate but accidentally triggered the sensor, fearing the killer might hear the toilet flush. He quickly closed the bathroom door, but how could he hide in such a small space? He stood on the toilet and the killer entered. He was simply trying to clean the blood off his body, and Nick breathed a sigh of relief. Then the killer suddenly spoke. Nick noticed the key on the body, sensing a serious situation, and carefully dismounted. He then hid in another stall through a partition, preventing the killer from entering. However, he accidentally triggered the flush sensor, causing him to step on the toilet. Fortunately, both toilets flushed simultaneously, avoiding the killer's attention. The killer then smashed the security guard's phone and left the bathroom. Only after confirming the killer was gone did Nick rush out. Elsewhere, the killer used a key to open the archive room, opened a suitcase, and placed several incendiary bombs inside, apparently intending to burn something. Nick, about to call the police, suddenly saw a colleague working overtime. Nick immediately told him about the killer. The two men then reached the elevator, hoping to escape, but found it locked. They then headed to the emergency exit, only to find it locked as well. Desperate, they returned to the office to plan their escape. Nick asked a colleague to use his computer to call the police while he returned to his desk to retrieve his phone. The next moment, however, they saw the killer approaching. Before they could shut down their computer, the killer arrived and noticed the lighted screen. Seeing the killer approaching, the two men hiding below were terrified. Fortunately, the killer didn't suspect anything and left after shutting down his computer. Once they were sure the killer was gone, they could finally escape. They then fled in the opposite direction, but before they had gone far, Nick suddenly remembered his boss was still working overtime. He asked his colleague to call the police while he went to inform his boss, but when he arrived at his office, he wasn't there. Elsewhere, after finding his phone, a colleague didn't immediately call the police but instead called his wife. But as soon as the call went through, the killer was standing behind him. The killer placed a hand on his shoulder, waited for him to say goodbye to his family, then pulled out a gun and asked if anyone else at the company was working overtime. Since his colleague hadn't betrayed Nick, it was clear he was doomed. Nick quickly returned to the office, but his colleague was nowhere to be found. Without further ado, he quietly slipped back to his desk, retrieved his phone, and quickly called the police. After waiting for a long time, there was no response. He took it down and discovered it was dead. He had no choice but to charge it again. Turning back, he saw his colleague's body lying next to him. Nick was utterly shocked. Before he could react, the killer had returned. Fortunately, Nick ducked in time, avoiding detection. While the killer was dealing with the body, Nick quietly got up and hid in a utility room nearby. As he was secretly observing the killer, Nick was frightened and wanted to escape, but the killer was walking towards this side with the body. The killer was about to find Nick, but suddenly stopped, and then the killer ran back. It turned out that Nick's cell phone rang. The killer looked at Nick's phone and knew that there was still a survivor here.